Chapter 1: The Ghost. You don't exist. That's the first thing they tell you, and at 23 years old, sitting in a basement that smells like gun oil and cold concrete, it sounds thrilling. It sounds like freedom. You have no idea it's a cage they're building around you, one rule at a time. You came from somewhere ordinary. Maybe the military. Maybe a government program that noticed how calm you stayed under pressure, how your hands didn't shake when everyone else's did. Maybe you answered an ad that wasn't really an ad. The exact path doesn't matter. What matters is that somewhere along the way, someone looked at you and saw something useful, something cold, and they were right. Training is not what you imagined. There are no gadgets, no movie music. There is only repetition until repetition becomes reflex. You learn how to move through a room without being remembered. You learn how to change your posture, your gait, your entire physical presence so that surveillance cameras capture someone slightly different every time. You learn how to be forgettable. And the terrifying thing? You're good at it. You take to it naturally, the way some people take to music or mathematics. Your world narrows. Old friends drift away because you stop returning calls. You stop returning calls because you have nothing real to say. What do you tell them? That you spent 6 weeks learning how to follow someone through 3 countries without being seen. That you can now identify every exit in any room within 4 seconds of entering? You smile at family dinners and feel a glass wall between you and everyone you used to love. But underneath the isolation, there is something else. There is a hum. It starts low, barely perceptible, the first time you complete a surveillance assignment without detection. Then it gets louder the first time you successfully slip into a secured building and out again without leaving a trace. Your brain releases something chemical and warm and deeply satisfying, and you don't yet understand that you are now chasing something you will never fully catch again. That first hit of competence, of invisible power, will be the most potent one you ever feel. Everything after is just trying to get back there. You study your first target from a distance. You don't know their name yet. You've been instructed to call them by a file number. This matters, though you won't understand why until much later. The dehumanization is deliberate. It is the first architectural brick in a wall that will eventually surround whatever you used to be. You watch. You document. You remain a ghost. And somewhere in the back of your brain, in the quiet hours before sleep, you feel something you're not supposed to feel. The beginning of a question. A small, faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Who is this person? Really? You silence it. You've been trained to silence it. You are very, very good at your job. But the question doesn't disappear. It waits. Chapter 2. The Operator. The first time it is clean. Clinical. Distant. That is the word your handlers use. Distant. Like a surgical procedure performed across a room. You don't see a face. You don't hear a voice. You receive a confirmation afterward, a single green light on a burner phone, and that is all. You wait for something to break open inside you. Guilt, horror, nausea. The things you've seen in movies. They don't come. What comes instead is a strange, unsettling calm. Like finishing a very difficult exam. Like submitting a project you've been working on for months. And that absence of feeling terrifies you more than any feeling could. You throw yourself into competence because competence is the only language your new world speaks. You learn to plan operations across multiple contingencies. You understand that the most dangerous moment in any job is the 3 minutes after, when adrenaline is highest and judgment is lowest, and you train yourself to be most controlled in precisely that window. You study patterns. How people move, where they feel safe, what routines make them complacent. You become a student of human predictability. You get better, faster, more efficient. The people who manage you notice. There are nods of approval, more complex assignments, higher value targets. And with each increase in responsibility, there is a corresponding increase in that warm chemical hum. Dopamine doesn't know the difference between winning a chess tournament and this. Your brain doesn't care about morality, cares about mastery. But something else is happening beneath the surface. You start having a specific kind of dream. Not nightmares exactly. In the dreams, you are just watching people. Strangers in restaurants, couples walking dogs, old men reading newspapers. You watch them the way you watch targets, with complete, detached attention. You're categorizing exits, noting behavioral patterns, constructing threat assessments for people who have never threatened anyone. You wake up exhausted from a night of surveillance that never happened. Your mind has begun doing it automatically. It no longer knows how to turn off. You try to date someone. They're warm and funny and completely, blessedly normal. You go to dinner 3 times. On the 4th dinner, they ask you why you seem so far away all the time, and you don't have an answer that doesn't end your career, so you say something vague and convincing and watch them slowly decide you're not worth the mystery. You let them go. It's easier. Everything complicated has become something to be neutralized. That's the word that surfaces one morning while you're shaving. Neutralize. You realize you've started using operational vocabulary in your thoughts about your own life. You file it away. You keep moving. Stillness is dangerous. The next assignment arrives. It is more complicated. The target is surrounded. You will need weeks of preparation, a secondary identity, a cover story maintained over sustained contact. You will need to get close. You feel the hum get louder. You don't ask about the file number anymore. You've stopped wanting to know. Chapter 3. The Specialist. You have a reputation now, though you'll never hear it spoken and never know exactly what it says. What you know is this: the assignments have changed. They're harder. They're messier. They require something beyond skill. They require judgment. And judgment in this world is not about right and wrong. It's about operational efficiency and acceptable risk. You operate across multiple countries now. You maintain 3 separate identities simultaneously, each with its own history, its own behavioral profile, its own way of moving through a room. You slip between them the way an actor slips between roles, except there is no curtain, no dressing room, no moment of release. You are always performing. The question that begins to haunt you, in the quiet moments on overnight trains, in hotel rooms that all look identical, is a simple, devastating one. Which one is me? You push it down. You are exceptionally good at pushing things down. The psychological cost of sustained cover is something no training can fully prepare you for. You eat meals with people who trust you, people who believe you are someone you are not, and you maintain the warmth and reciprocity of friendship while your mind runs parallel calculations. The human brain was not built for this duality. Something in the neural architecture begins to blur. Empathy becomes a tool you deploy rather than something you feel. You learn to read grief, warmth, fear, love. Not because you experience them alongside others, but because recognizing them helps you control a situation. You are becoming something efficient and terrible and very, very good at what you do. The first time an operation goes sideways, the first time a variable you didn't account for introduces chaos, you discover something remarkable about yourself. You don't panic. While other people's hearts are hammering and their thinking is fracturing, yours crystallizes. You become most yourself in the worst moments. And that clarity feels like power. Deep, seductive, genuine power. You adapt. You resolve it. You walk away clean. That night, alone in a rented apartment in a city you'll never return to, you feel something close to joy. And immediately after the joy, something close to horror. Because you understand, in that moment with utter clarity, that the worst day of your professional life was also the best you've ever felt. That the thing that makes you exceptional is the same thing eating your humanity from the inside. You pour a drink. You sit with that for a while. Then you put it in the same deep, locked place you put everything else, and you go to sleep in 4 minutes and 20 seconds because you trained yourself to do exactly that. Chapter 4. The Architect. You don't just execute now. You design. Operations are handed to you as problems, not plans. You receive intelligence, constraints, objectives, and a resources budget. You construct the solution. You decide the approach, the timing, the personnel involved, when personnel are involved at all. You have become the mind behind the mechanics, and this elevation carries with it something intoxicating: the distance of abstraction. It is, you discover, psychologically easier to design something than to do it. The further the action gets from your hands, the quieter that background noise in your conscience becomes. You understand now why so many architects of terrible things throughout history slept soundly. The distance isn't just physical, it's moral. And your mind, brilliant and trained and relentlessly adaptive, has found a way to use abstraction as insulation. You rationalize with extraordinary sophistication. You have, at this point, built a complete internal framework, elegant, logically coherent, that explains why every target deserved to be a target. You don't think of it as self-justification. You think of it as clarity. You tell yourself you only operate against people who would cause greater harm. You tell yourself the math always checks out. You have never had a single moment of genuine doubt about this framework. That is how you know it's a lie. Genuine moral conviction tolerates scrutiny. It invites questions. It doesn't need to be immediately, automatically, hermetically sealed every time the edges get tested. But yours does. Yours is a fortress specifically because what's inside it cannot survive open air. Your personal life has become a kind of elaborate maintenance exercise. You have a residence that looks like a home. You have social contacts who would describe you as pleasant, thoughtful, slightly distant. You have one person who has gotten closer than most. Someone perceptive enough to sense the depth behind the walls, patient enough to keep showing up, and you feel, in their presence, something genuine and frightened. You want them. You also know that wanting them is a vulnerability in an operational sense, and so you hold them at exactly the distance where you can feel the warmth without letting them close enough to see the cold. It is an exhausting distance to maintain. Some nights, the architecture of your own psychology is the most impressive construction you've ever built. And the most suffocating. Chapter 5, The Shadow. You are a myth now. A name that circulates in certain circles the way urban legends circulate. No one quite sure if the source is real, the details always slightly different depending on who's telling the story. You have cultivated this deliberately. A reputation is a weapon. Fear is an efficiency tool. When the right people believe in the myth of you, some problems resolve themselves without any action required. This is power at its most rarefied. And it is completely, profoundly lonely. You trust no one. Not because you're paranoid. Paranoia implies irrational fear, but because you have spent 15 years studying how people betray each other, and you now understand betrayal the way a marine biologist understands water. As the natural medium, the default state, the thing everything else exists inside. Trust is a cost-benefit calculation. Everyone is a potential liability, including the people who manage you, especially them. You've started questioning assignments. Not morally, you finished that evolution a long time ago. Strategically, you notice inconsistencies, targets that don't fit the patterns you were given, operations that seem to serve interests you weren't told about. You're smart enough to have built a picture, over years, of what the organization truly is beneath what it presents itself as. And what you've found is that the moral clarity your framework promised, the idea that you were a necessary evil keeping worse evils at bay, was itself a product someone designed to keep you functional. You were the asset who believed the mythology because the mythology was engineered for someone exactly like you. The anger that comes with this realization is cold and quiet and ancient feeling, like discovering a room that's been locked in your house for years and finding it full of evidence. But here's what you also discover. You have no one to tell. There is no person on earth who knows enough of your real history to understand the significance of what you've found, and no one you trust enough to tell even if they did. You are, in the most complete sense, alone with the truth. And the truth is simply this. You gave everything, your name, your history, your relationships, your peace, to something that was using you. And you were too good at your job to see it. The person who got closest to you sends a final message. They've waited long enough. They're done waiting. You read it 3 times on a phone you'll destroy in an hour, and you feel something crumble in a place you thought you'd already evacuated. You don't respond. You have no response that doesn't compromise either of you. You close the phone. You breathe. You move. Chapter 6. The Phantom. You are beyond the organization now. This happened the way most endings happen, not in a single dramatic moment, but across a series of small, irreversible decisions that assembled themselves into a point of no return before you fully realized the line had been crossed. They decided you knew too much. You decided they couldn't be trusted. The mutual recognition of incompatibility arrived like a quiet, professional divorce. Except divorces don't include active efforts to locate and silence one party. You are being hunted by the people who made you. And here, at the top of the architecture, at the apex of everything you built yourself into, you discover the final and most devastating truth about what this life does to the human mind. There is no victory condition. There is no destination. There is only continuation, only survival, only the next room, the next city, the next identity, the next calculation. You have become the most capable person you know, and you have never been less free. The skills are extraordinary. Your ability to disappear is absolute. You can live in a city for 6 months and leave no trace that can be confirmed or disproved. You can read a room's threat level faster than most people read a menu. You can construct a new identity in 72 hours and inhabit it completely within a week. You are, by any operational measure, remarkable. And you sit in an apartment somewhere, it doesn't matter where, and you look at your hands and you try to remember the last time they were just hands. The last time they weren't instruments. The last time you touched something you weren't also assessing. You can't find it. The memory is gone. Not repressed, gone. Overwritten by 15 years of operational data. The person you were at 23 in that basement that smelled like gun oil and concrete had a self. A genuine, unperformed self. You can describe that person. You remember their preferences, their humor, the way they felt about certain music. But when you reach for them now, you reach through glass. They exist as information, not as experience. You know who you were the way you know a file, accurate, complete, and completely inaccessible. This is the thing no one tells you. This is the cost that doesn't appear in any operational briefing. It isn't guilt. It isn't nightmares. It isn't the faces of targets in the dark. Those things you can manage. What you cannot manage, what turns out to be truly, permanently unmanageable, is the loss of the self that existed before the work began. The irreversible erosion of something that was yours and only yours, that you traded away so gradually you never had a moment to mourn it. You were exceptional. You were the best. You are a ghost in more than one sense. And in the silence of an empty room, somewhere in a city that doesn't know your name, you finally let yourself ask the question you buried 20 years ago. Was it worth it? The silence answers. Doctor's diagnosis, the psychology of this life. What you just experienced across those 6 chapters isn't simply a thriller narrative. It is a precise and clinically recognizable map of what sustained covert identity, real or imagined, does to the architecture of a human mind. Let's start with why this fantasy is so powerfully seductive. The assassin myth offers something the modern world systematically denies: agency without accountability. In ordinary life, power comes with exposure. Achievement comes with vulnerability. To be seen succeeding is also to be seen failing, to be known, to be available for judgment. The fantasy of the assassin inverts this completely. You are maximally powerful and maximally invisible simultaneously. You are the most important person in any room, and no one in the room knows it. That is the purest possible form of ego protection, and the human psyche is drawn to it the way iron is drawn to a magnet. But look at what the fantasy actually delivers over time. The dopamine architecture in this life is deeply pathological. Real, sustainable satisfaction comes from relational achievement. Being known, being loved, being witnessed in your full complexity by people who choose to stay. The assassin's dopamine loop is built instead on competence and secrecy, 2 sources that rapidly escalate in required intensity while delivering diminishing returns. You need a harder job, a closer call, a higher stakes operation to feel the same hit. Meanwhile, the relational infrastructure that could provide genuine, durable satisfaction is systematically dismantled by the requirements of the work itself. You end up running harder and harder on a treadmill that only accelerates. The cognitive dissonance in this life is industrial scale. The mind cannot sustain a fundamental contradiction without building elaborate scaffolding around it. The rationalization framework that the architect constructs, the internal logic that explains why every target deserves to be a target, is